I'm a combative person, so I like crushing bastards.
It's time that the Obama administration treats WikiLeaks for what it is, a terrorist organization.
What we should do is treat Assange as an enemy combatant who was engaged in information warfare against the United States.
He's a blackmail, extortionist, terrorist.
Crackpot, alleged sex offender.
We got special ops forces. I mean, the dead man can't leak stuff. Illegally shoot the son of a...
This little punk, now I stand up for Obama. Obama, if you're listening today, you should take this guy out.
I think Obama should put out a contract and maybe use a drone or something.
Since WikiLeaks went online in 2006, it has published hundreds of thousands of pages of classified material about international warfare, diplomacy, and policy, especially related to the United States. This, of course, has come to the great displeasure of the U.S. government, which denounces WikiLeaks as a subversive organization that spreads lies and has taken the leaked files out of context. So what exactly do the WikiLeaks files reveal? And what do they tell us about the United States? The story begins in 2006, when a network of hackers, programmers, activists, and journalists, led by Australian hacker Julian Assange, established the WikiLeaks website. It was designed to be a platform for whistleblowers, which would allow them to upload documents anonymously. Squarely and WikiLeaks sites were shady, corrupt, or illegal practices by governments, institutions, and corporations.
When I was director of CIA, there was some stuff we were doing I wanted all 300 million Americans to know. But I never figured out a way about informing a whole bunch of other people who didn't have a right to that information and who may actually use that image or that fact or that data or that message to harm my countrymen.
Since then, its global profile has grown immensely. The website has disclosed some momentous revelations, with some of the most famous including information about mass electronic snooping carried out by the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA.
We've begun to review the way that we gather intelligence so that we properly balance the legitimate security concerns of our citizens and allies with the privacy concerns that all people share.
WikiLeaks has, as of 2016, published 2,325,961 U.S. State Department records. That's about 2 billion words in total, which, if printed, would fill around 30,000 volumes.
It's been reported that WikiLeaks, your baby, has, in the last few years, has released more classified documents than the rest of the world's media combined. Can that possibly be true?
Yeah, can it possibly be true? It's a worry, isn't it? That the rest of the world's media is doing such a bad job that a little group of activists is able to release more of that type of information than the rest of the world press combined.
The records also showed that the State Department, the heart of American diplomacy, was placing a positive and optimistic sheen on policies that were causing devastation in other parts of the world. What's more, they had also budgeted more than $1 billion each year for public diplomacy. In other words, they were investing in propaganda. For its part, the U.S. government has actively worked against WikiLeaks. Both the George W. Bush and Barack Obama administrations have condemned WikiLeaks, with Joe Biden going as far as proclaiming Assange to be a cyber terrorist.
Mitch McConnell says he's a high-tech terrorist. Others say this is akin to the Pentagon Papers. Where do you come down?
I would argue that it's closer to being a high-tech terrorist than the Pentagon Papers.
As renowned anthropologist Talal Assad says, war is a conflict waged by people of good character for benign motives when all other possible alternatives have been exhausted. In other words, it's a last resort. Successive U.S. governments have always claimed their wars are just. And yet, as WikiLeaks has proved, the United States has time and again shown little respect for international law and has even committed war crimes to advance its agenda. For example, the United States has bombarded and executed civilians on numerous occasions. In 2006, in the Iraqi town of Ishaqi, at least 10 Iraqi civilians were executed, including a woman in her 70s and a 5-month-old infant. The civilians were handcuffed and shot in the head.
بعدين بالطائرات قصفوهم قصفوا البيت قصفوا فوقهم وحتى يمحون الأدلة يعني حتى الطفل الصغير اللي عمره 6 أشهر قتلوه حتى الأبقار يعتبروها شهداء قتلوها.
In response to claims, as many as 13 civilians were killed in a March 15th airstrike in the vicinity of Ishaqi, south of Samarra, an investigation was launched into the incident the very next day. The investigation revealed the ground force commander, while capturing and killing terrorists, operated in accordance with the rules of engagement governing our combat forces in Iraq. The investigating officer concluded that possibly up to 9 collateral deaths resulted from this engagement, but could not determine the precise number due to the collapsed walls and heavy debris. Allegations that the troops executed a family living in this safe house and then hid the alleged crimes by directing an airstrike are absolutely false.
The United States has also assassinated civilians and journalists. A classified U.S. military video from 2007 shows U.S. helicopters killing a dozen people in Baghdad, including 2 Iraqi Reuters news staff.
So, what was the impact of that?
The impact on the people who worked on it was severe.
My horrific task was to go through the entire movie and pull out the stills to put on the website. And at the same time, I was learning who these people were, that I could see their flesh being torn off their bodies.
We ended up sending 2 people to Baghdad to further research that story. So this is just the first of 3 attacks that occur in that scene.
I mean, 11 people died in that attack, right? Including 2 Reuters employees.
Yeah, 2 Reuters employees, 2 young children were wounded. There were between 18 and 26 people killed altogether.
And of course, the United States has tortured detainees at its military prison in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, even though very few of the detainees there have ever been charged with any offense.
My name is Ruhal Ahmed from Tipton, West Midlands. I was in Guantanamo Bay from 2001 to 2004, falsely imprisoned for terrorism.
My name is Shafiq Rasool. I am from Tipton in the West Midlands. I was imprisoned and tortured in Guantanamo Bay from 2001 till 2004 under false accusations of terrorism.
My name is Mozam Beg. I'm from the city of Birmingham. I was held by the Americans in Guantanamo Bay between 2002 and 2005 without charge or trial.
Although the U.S. claimed that its actions in Guantanamo were righteous, the WikiLeaks files proved this to be completely false.
What's taking place down there is responsible, it's humane, it's legal, it's proper, it's consistent with the Geneva Conventions, and after a period, that will sink in.
Government officials told the public that the Guantanamo detainees were basically the scum of the earth, terrorists who posed a clear and present danger to Americans.
The detainees are not choir boys.
They're believed to be determined killers.
These people are terrorists. They're terrorists. That's the only thing I can say. They're terrorists.
In reality, however, the WikiLeaks files show that many prisoners were still held even though they posed no risk whatsoever.
We should be sending more terrorists there for further interrogation to keep this country safe. As far as I'm concerned, every last one of them can rot in hell. But as long as they don't do that, then they can rot in Guantanamo Bay.
In fact, many were likely innocent of any crime, swept off the Afghan battlefield and handed over to U.S. forces in exchange for bounties.
They almost all had about the same story. They either had gone to Afghanistan to find a wife or that they had been studying in a madrasa. Now, some of them, without a doubt, were telling the truth, but others were very bad people. The problem I had is that I had no way of telling the difference.
You might think that the definition of what constitutes torture is pretty straightforward, but the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, has found ways of getting around such definitions. Let's be clear, under George W. Bush, the United States tortured people, and the evidence is there to prove it. In 2002, the CIA captured Abu Zubaydah, a Saudi national who was allegedly associated with al-Qaeda in Pakistan. The CIA publicly celebrated his capture, claiming that he was one of their highest-profile arrests. Zubaydah was then promptly sent to Guantanamo. WikiLeaks files show that he was forced to spend 2 weeks inside a coffin-shaped box. He was subjected to sleep deprivation, stress positions, and slappings, and insects were even scattered inside the box.
I mean, they kept him sleepless. They put him in a small coffin-sized box for hours overnight. He couldn't move. They hung him by the cell bars and with his feet dangling off the ground. I mean, it got to the point it was so bad that Mitchell would just snap his fingers and Zubaydah would get onto the waterboard. I mean, what they did to him was far worse, in my view, than waterboarding.
During this interrogation period, the bullet wound he'd received during his capture was allowed to fester and rot.
Hidden in Thailand, videotapes of the interrogation of Abu Zubaydah.
I was told if those videotapes had ever been seen, the reaction around the world would not have been survivable.
He eventually admitted he'd associated with armed jihadi groups, but denied connections to al-Qaeda, and appeared to be telling the truth. But then, the United States decided to make Zubaydah disappear, which meant that he was unable to get access to the International Red Cross. Zubaydah was never charged with a crime, And yet, unbelievably, he continues to be held in Guantanamo.
He's been held here at Guantanamo Bay for 15 years without charge. He's scheduled to talk about the sights, sounds and smells of his cell in Camp 7. Now, Camp 7 is one of the most secret camps here at Guantanamo Bay. We don't know its location. We don't even know how much that camp costs to build.
In 2002, the Rome Statute established the International Criminal Court, ICC, which was ratified by 122 signatory countries. The ICC has the authority to investigate individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. From the start, American negotiators sought to limit the ICC and its independence. Most countries were in favor of universal jurisdiction, which would imply that the ICC could prosecute war crimes committed anywhere. However, the United States didn't like the idea and forced a compromise.
As far as America is concerned, the ICC has no jurisdiction, no legitimacy, and no authority.
The ICC could only prosecute crimes if an individual of a ratifying state committed them, and only then if committed on the territory of a state party to the Rome Statute. Although displeased even with this compromise, President Bill Clinton nonetheless signed the Rome Statute, which served as a symbolic but not legally binding endorsement of the treaty. In 2002, George W. Bush withdrew the United States' signature from the already weak treaty.
The International Criminal Court is troubling to the United States. It's troubling to the administration, obviously troubling to the United States Senate as well. President Clinton signed this treaty, but when he signed it, he said it should not be submitted to the Senate. And therefore never has been, and I don't intend to submit it either.
Which meant that American citizens were free from the threat of prosecution for war crimes. John Bolton, Bush's Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, claimed that the United States would instead follow its values when measuring the legitimacy of its actions.
The United States will use any means necessary to protect our citizens and those of our allies from unjust prosecution by this illegitimate court. We will not cooperate with the ICC. We will provide no assistance to the ICC, and we certainly will not join the ICC.
Consequently, in its 13-year history, the court has only indicted citizens of African countries.
Of the 26 cases brought before the court so far, all have dealt with crimes committed in Africa. To date, the court has reached verdicts in 6 cases, resulting in 8 convictions and 2 acquittals.
On top of this, the ICC has no enforcement officers of its own and depends on government's cooperation to detain and extradite indicted individuals. Transnational forces govern the global economy. Big banks, the finance sector, and the market all play their parts, but what determines their behavior? The simple answer is American imperialism. The United States has long defined its imperial mission. First expressed in the country's 19th century doctrine of manifest destiny, the United States has since its earliest days aimed to spread and institutionalize capitalism throughout the globe. This behavior is typified through the establishment of international trade agreements, which seek to ensure American capitalism becomes the world's prevalent economic model. In 2014, WikiLeaks released drafts of 2 obscure free trade treaties, the Trade and Services Agreement, TISA.
On Thursday, WikiLeaks released the secret draft text for a trade deal called the Trade and Services Agreement. The deal covers 50 countries and over 68% of world trade and services. Until now, the draft has been classified to keep it secret not only during the negotiations, but also for 5 years post-enactment. According to the leaked text, the trade deal aims to cement the deregulatory model of the 1990s by forbidding countries from improving financial regulation.
And the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP.
Some of the inner workings of the TPP have now been dragged out of the shadows and into the sunlight. This morning, WikiLeaks leaked the actual text of the intellectual property chapter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a 95-page document revealing in great detail just where negotiations currently stand on a number of very important IP issues. The documents expose the United States as one of the primary drivers of a slew of new anti-consumer laws that could take effect all across the Pacific.
The drafts also bypassed environmental and labor protection standards set by the World Trade Organization. Meanwhile, the finance sector wields a powerful influence over U.S. policy. Between 1973 and 2007, profits from the financial sector grew from 16 to 41% of total profits in the U.S. economy. And today, Wall Street accounts for just over a third of financial transactions worldwide. This scale gives financial communities power. And it's from them that the US government collects technical expertise, training, legal knowledge, and attitudes. The government then adheres to this advice blindly, with other nations following its lead. Through this relationship, American financial institutions are basically free from democratic oversight and can maintain an iron grip on politics and decision-making. Thus, the financial sector ensures its centrality in the world, with US administrations championing and protecting these financial interests on a global scale. This is how the financial interests of the US have merged with global economic interests to virtually become one and the same. The extent of the United States' hegemonic power and its machinations are no secret. However, the WikiLeaks files offer a more precise picture and help flesh out the true nature of the country's political dealings. Upon examining leaked top-secret State Department cables, it becomes clear that by manipulating language and regulations to pursue its economic goals, the United States has expanded its global hegemony and continues to do so.